But welcome to another edition of Engagement That Scales. Rachel, take it away.
Thank you, Shannon. I am so excited to have Chapman here today because I last week we had Jake McGee on the show, and I was like, when did we meet? How did we meet? And with him, I could remember. With you, I don't even know. It's like you were always there. Do you like Boston social media group? Maybe we met at South by Southwest.
Yeah, it's funny. You put me on the spot. I don't know. It's funny. I'm really bad at sometimes with that. And yeah, I don't remember when we first crossed paths. I mean, there's so many possibilities between South by and Boston.
And Hanley, you wrote the content.
Yeah.
Tools with her. And yeah, so I don't know. Anyways, I've been following Cece's work for a long time, suffice it to say. And you have a long history with doing so many unique things with some nonprofits, with content online, media. Maybe it was Boston Media Maker.
It could have been Boston. I was like, was it New England Podcasters back in the way?
Yeah, and I'm like, maybe
that. Media Makers, yeah.
And now you are teaching a whole new generation.
I am.
of youngins, how it's done. And I would first, before we get started, just love to hear what you've been up to, what you're thinking about. Yeah.
So I am now a full-time instructor at Wheaton College in Norton, Mass, in the business and management department. It's been a lot of fun. I've been there. This is the start of my third year there, teaching full-time.
Has it been that long?
Yeah, it's crazy, right? So what's crazy is the program's only 7 years old now. So it's a brand new, Wheaton's very old, 1834, I think. But the business and management's a new degree, new management, new department. And so it's been fun building with all these liberal arts majors and artists and all this crazy stuff. And I, after years of, running agencies and speaking on stages around the world, to be in a classroom every day is amazing. And then lo and behold, now we're out of the classroom again and it's virtual. So
You're like, I was trying to get out of the little box and here we are.
Oh, it's been crazy. I joked to my wife, I said, after years of being like, I want to get into a classroom and now, but it's been good because my years of working before this, I'd worked from home for almost 12 years, remotely for different companies and my own company and stuff. So, Zoom and webinars is old hat for me. And I was really able to help faculty get on board with this. Oh my God, we got to teach online. What does that mean?
People must be going crazy, and we're going crazy because somebody has found our chat. And
yeah, ignore that.
Ignore that.
Not very nice. We are trying to shut that down.
I do not know how that happened, but ignore that because that's not us. So I've been interacting with a couple of educators. Both, I have a daughter who is now learning online, and I've been working with my school on how they're transitioning online. And some things are going better than others. It's been bumpy though.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about where people's heads are at, kind of what they're thinking about, and what are they struggling with?
Well, it's funny because I come at it from several different angles too, because whereas as a college professor, I've got my students, and then I've got two college kids dealing with this too. A very high-tech game design major senior who's like, okay, cool. Microsoft Teams, we're doing this all right with his school. They already live streamed all their classes anyways. And then I have a first-year art student who is now living in Zoom and hating it. The fact of the matter that she wants to be in the studio making stuff. That's her thing. And to suddenly be like in online is like, oh, I hate this.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing that I'm running into, and the thing I'm seeing is that, online learning, true online classes and online learning works for certain people. Not everybody. I've taken classes online before, and sometimes it's like, okay, it's good. It all depends on how it's structured, how it's put together, how it's planned out. True online learning and online classes are that way. Nobody's doing that right now because it was literally like, let's go. It's now online. It's funny because we've been very adamant to say that we're teaching online rather than online learning, because we had to quickly shift to be online I know the Wheaton has taken the approach of being very asynchronous because we have such a global population of students, and we wanted to make sure that, you know, we have students who don't have access to stable internet, or their home situation may not be the most satisfactory environment for learning. So we've got students, so we've really been trying to focus on asynchronous, you know, lots of lessons, presenting all of our classes in, you know, having text-based versions, low bandwidth versions, so audio only or video only. I've taken the approach where I am doing a class every week, a live class, but because I thought, my belief, and I've had students thank me for it, is that, you know, some students would want that sort of structure. And I've made it completely optional. I'm like, I'm not taking attendance. I mean, Zoom makes it nice and easy that, you know, it records it records the chat, it records an audio only version. And I've told my students, listen, you do not have to come to this live, but, you know, if you do want to come on, and we'll have questions and we'll have discussions and that sort of stuff. And that approach seems to be working. And I've been checking in with students because it's advising. Well, advising week starts next week, but I started a little earlier since I have so many advisees. And most of them, the overall opinion has been, this isn't what I wanted, but I'm dealing with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I am running into several, you know, students are dealing with sick parents, or just the world that we're in right now. It's tough, right? Or they're home and they're being asked to be the caregiver for their younger siblings who are home too, and the parents are working. So it's a mixed bag. But I think the key thing is that, from talking to other educators, you know, we're making sure we're staying in touch with the students to be like, let us, you know, I literally 5 minutes before this had a student say, hey, can I get an extension on my homework? My mom's going through chemo and I'm not in the right. I said, and I was like, yes, don't even need an excuse. You know, I'm not.
You know, this is coming up a lot, and not just in the student thing that I've seen, professionals, parents, whatever, they're all at home and all of a sudden they're completely stressed out that they have to do exactly the same work that they were doing offline. And you're like, we're in a global pandemic.
Yeah.
Like, even those of us that are used to working at home have kids at home now. And, you know, I just had this problem before coming on the show. My husband was here going, who's feeding the kid? And I'm like, not me. Maybe she is. I don't know. So it's not normal times.
No, and it's tough. The concept. I wrote a blog post this morning where I was talking about how, I know you've seen this. All the people are like, be more productive, learn a language, write a book, which is fine. If you can do that, all the more power. Because yeah, we do have some free time. But this is not a vacation, at least for most of us. I mean, mentally, what I was writing was, I was like, I would love to be working on, my plan for spring break from school was to work on my next book. That was my intention. But then this kind of happened. And the idea of writing, I can't concentrate long enough. I'm spending my time worrying about my kids, my students. It's really different. I think people need to realize, and plus all those people who have never worked at home before, those of us who have done it like you and I, we know working from home, especially in the beginning, you realize, oh, I can work all day because you're not, there's no separation. And it takes a long time to get out of that groove of, no, I can't run errands. No, I can't take care of the kid. I got to do work. That's, and I mean, with your spouse or partner, it's hard sometimes.
But like, you got to be very clear. And it is funny because I've worked from home for years and I have a pretty good routine. What's throwing me off is I'm used to taking my kid to school in the morning. And just that fact of I'm not getting out of the house at the same time every day is like throwing me off. And so figuring out those routines is not going to happen in like 2 or 3 days.
No.
And I think there's a great psychological term for it, but it's when I expect something from you, but I don't articulate that and I put the stress on myself. I've been encouraging everybody to just make it explicit, especially if you're in a power position, if you're the teacher, if you're the manager, if you're whatever, to say, listen, like, we're all doing the best we can. We all deal with this differently. We all have different stuff going on at home. So we'll continue to the extent we can, but if you can't, just let me know. Right?
Yeah, and I've been really adamant with my students, and I know it's hard because some students don't come forth and say, hey, I need help, or hey, I'm having a hard time, no matter what age they are. So like literally this morning, I sent a note to all my advisees. I said, please take 5 seconds and hit reply and just say, I'm alive and well. That's all I need to know. Because I hadn't heard from a few of them. And a couple of them like, hey, professor, I'm fine. I'm like, okay, that's all I needed. But, we're trying to check in with, we're really trying to be adamant about checking in on students. And when you don't hear from them, sometimes it's just radio silence. That's fine. But sometimes they don't know that they can ask for help, or they feel
absolutely.
like, so we've been, I know Wheaton's been really pushing hard, trying to make it really clear. And I know teachers everywhere are fighting this, and as parent and teacher people get it. Cause like, we're worried about our kids, and then we're like, let's check in with, our students.
Yeah, I've been encouraging people to like explicitly talk about feelings. How are you feeling? Like, what's going, because it's, we're all isolated.
Yeah.
And some of us are isolated to a greater or lesser degree than others, but regardless, like and I was just talking to a team member this morning, we're all able to work because we've always worked virtually. So our work hasn't changed, but the world around us has changed. And so it can feel very disassociative because we're like sitting there just doing our stuff. And then we pick our heads up and we're like, oh my God, like.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's interesting. My wife works at a hospital, and she came home the other day and goes, hey, can we watch the news? And I said, why? And she goes, well, it was funny because she said, well, I don't know what's going on. She goes, I realized I haven't seen the news. I haven't looked at social media in like 3 or 4 days. I mean, she knows, because she's focusing on her immediate world, which a lot of us are focusing on our immediate world. I was like, yeah, sure, we can watch the news. And it was so weird because we sat down and watched the news, which is something we hadn't done in a while.
Yep. Yeah, so let's talk, you mentioned this, and I think this is an interesting lens on this whole thing of like, the other thing that I see people doing is trying to take constructs that work in the real world and just kind of slap them on digital and be like, hey, we're teaching a class online. I've observed, I won't say who, sitting and doing Zoom meetings for like 6 to 8 hours a day because they do meetings in real life 6 to 8 hours a day. And I'm like, guys, that you're doing this wrong. You're using it all wrong. Like, this gives you the opportunity to not have to have so many meetings.
Right. And not every meeting has to be a video-based Zoom meeting. Phone calls still work. I saw it the other day where someone was like, not every meeting has to be a Zoom meeting, but now you're right. Everybody's just like, let's do Zoom or Teams or whatever, But it doesn't, it's ridiculous because those of us who have worked at home for years know having a 10-minute, we do have to get together and do a 10-minute, let's focus on stuff and then break apart is good. But that whole construct of hour-long meeting is ridiculous in this sort of situation.
Yeah, and so the asynchronous piece is interesting to me. And one of the reasons it's interesting, like I have been so impressed with my daughter's teacher and school because, and it's very similar to the organizations we work with. They already had an app called Seesaw, which created a community of her 4th grade students, the parents, the teacher, and grandparents. So it's broader than just the classroom. But they used it mostly to communicate out to parents and grandparents. Like they'd share their work every once in a while, or the teacher would communicate or whatever. And they were already also using iPads in class. So they were recording things and posting things and using technology in some interesting ways. Not a lot, but a little here and there in appropriate settings or in discrete ways. So what I've observed is they're just doing that more, right? Like they're just bringing what was a secondary or tertiary platform and making it primary. And they're much more ready to do that because they had it. They're not scrambling to use something they didn't ever use before.
Yeah.
And because of the sensitivity to asynchronous, and some of the kids in my daughter's class got stuck on spring break internationally, right? So like not everybody's in the same time zone. My daughter's teacher is posting like a class meeting, like announcements every morning. And she's having the kids record hello.
That's cool.
And it's like just doing that, it was very simple, of turning a chat to a voice chat. And it adds a dimension without adding the need to get on an hour Zoom, right? Like, give a little bit of information, get some reaction to it. And actually, one of the things I love as a parent is I get to work on all of this. I never see her in the classroom, right? So like now I'm like, oh, she's so much nicer to her teachers.
Wow.
So
Yeah,
I have this, I think this is so interesting. And I think I've heard from friends and from neighbors that are used to working online. Sort of what you're talking about is that every meeting doesn't have to be a meeting, you know, what could be an email. But I'm also hearing there are a lot of people that don't like it, that like miss the meetings, only learn and meet, like those kinds of things. Do you have advice for those people? Because there's someone who's managing a team who's like, no, I need to meet with you. I have a friend, we used to work together, and he manages a group of people. They used to be in the office and now they're online. And he says one of his employees calls him 7 or 8 times a day because his employee feels like he can only communicate that way, whether it's like actually on the phone or it's a Zoom call. And my friend is like, no, we don't have to talk, but he can't get that across to his employees. Do you have advice for like managing that down or managing it up if you need to?
I mean, I've worked in different teams over the years, whether it's client person relationship, whether it's an agency, whole companies that are remote. The key thing is figuring, especially from a management perspective, like that perspective, you've got to really figure out, just like in the real world, sorry, this is our real world, just like in a physical office.
In our imaginary heads,
people are motivated by different things, and you have to figure out who on your team needs what. And if it is, you know, if you do need that virtual physical communication, seeing people, because I do think this helps, you know, because if this conversation was just audio, it would be very different. Being able to see ourselves react and stuff. We're humans, we like seeing that. Like, I hate the phone. I hate it. I always have. But I like text. I'm fine with text or Slack or whatever, that sort of thing. But I think the key thing is if you have someone on your team, is figuring out on your team what people need. And the problem is, you know, in any sort of work online, work from home, sort of semi-virtual environment, it takes months and years to figure that out. And the entire, you know, world has been shifted into this over the course of a couple weeks. And it is a drastic change, and it is going to be drastically hard for managers to figure that out. You know, I've been trying to figure that out with just students even, or even other faculty members. Members of our department are not necessarily into this, you know, but we're making it work. And I think patience is the key thing. Patience, and understand that, you know, I think every manager, this is true no matter what they do for, you know, part of management is figuring out how to motivate your employees, what they need, and then working with each of them. And sometimes bending them a little bit towards what you need as a manager, because different management styles too. It's always fun teaching first years when I talk about management, and I'm like trying to, you know, they haven't done that yet. And I'm like, it is one of the hardest gigs. Not everybody's meant to be a manager. And when you have a virtual team, it's even harder, I think. I mean, I've managed people that I've only met online before, and that's just a whole other ball of confusion. Do you have any tips, Rachel? I'm curious.
One of the themes that's been running through a lot of these conversations that I've had about moving things online is the digital channel makes everything explicit. And that is hard because we're not, having worked in an offline number of companies, things get really political and kind of passive aggressive, and things aren't explicit, right? There's a lot of like subtext and whatever. And initially it's really hard because people aren't used to it, and they're faced with, I'm really frustrated and I don't know how to say that in this environment. Over time, it gets really great because as a manager, I almost always start, Shannon can keep me honest here, but like when I check in with team members, I almost always start with, how are you feeling? Right?
Sometimes it'll be 20 minutes before we get to work. And I don't mean that in a bad way.
No, that's how I approach things too. I was like, I had an advising meeting yesterday. We spent 20 minutes just catching up, shooting the breeze. I'm like, that's good. I mean, that's how I roll. I need to know people.
And what it does is it gives people space. right? You're giving people space to tell you that they're frustrated,
Yeah.
right? Which if you're frustrated and you're not given that space, you can get resentful really quickly, right? Like things just build up. And so as a manager, you have to be constantly like pulling that yarn and teaching people that it's okay to say, I'm frustrated, or this is driving me crazy, or whatever. And then you learn that that's actually a more effective way of resolving issues, period, right? Like we should have been doing that all along.
I wish all managers would learn that, because
right?
I know I haven't always had those kind of managers.
It forced me to understand that more explicitly. And it forces you to acknowledge. So what's been funny to me about this whole crisis is people are coming on and they just want to see dogs. And I'm like, 2 years ago, you did not want to see a dog. You did not want to see a cat in a box. Like you didn't want to see any of this stuff. And now, lo and behold, all you want to see is selfies of your employees and cats in boxes. And why is that? Because we need that release, right? And in the real world, we go and get a cup of coffee and we shoot the floor with our colleagues and we get that release. And it's so non-intentional or non-explicit for us that when we come online, we don't provide space for it because we're like, we're having a meeting, we're gonna start right. I'm like, when did a meeting ever start on time without?
Yeah, and that's why I love, one of the things I love that it's a habit of mine when I get into a Zoom call or anything is like, you're covering up your background, right? But like Shannon, when I first got on, like I'm looking at her background and what's in behind, and I know like my office needs to be clean, and usually, speaking of dog, there's usually a dog laying there. I don't know where, it's rainy today, so they're asleep. But yeah, my dog's been in almost all my classes. Oh, there we go. Oh. See, dogs and cats make it, and, you know, well, that's like, remember when the guy was on CNN a couple years ago and his kids ran in the background, and that was like earth-shattering news. And now I think everybody who's going through this is like, oh, I get it. Kids are gonna run in, or kids are gonna, and it's not that big of a deal. It is awkward. Don't get me wrong. I mean, my son's on the other side of this wall gaming, and I said, dude, you got to keep it down. No screaming while I'm on this call.
But I think that's so important to say, right? Because for those of us that I know that it wasn't a big deal for me to just pick up Penny because I know you guys, I know our audience. But you said it before, Cece, it's really important to be explicit. Like you said to your student, like, yes, have an extension. Like, I think, and we've been talking about this a lot, just that, say to your team, like, I get it. You've got 2 kids at home. Or like, I get it. You have a cat that loves to sit on the keyboard. Like, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because people are so anxious about this change.
Well,
and your ability as a manager to disarm them, I think, is really powerful.
People have, like, there's sick family members, right? Like, people are like, or doctors, nurses, whatever, going out and dealing with the sick patients, and that's anxiety producing, right? Cece, you're in that.
Yeah, I had a weird moment the other day when my first class, where all of a sudden I was in the bedroom of all my students, you know, and it was just kind of weird. Like all of a sudden I was like, it like clicked, like as everybody was popping in, I was like, this is sort of strange. It's like seeing, you know, and I told my students, I said, listen, by the way, you have no need to have video on unless you want to. It's not like, especially because once I started lecturing, I can't see their faces anyways. But it was one of those weird moments where I'm used to, after years, it's, you know, it's people's offices, it's their kitchens, it's that sort of thing. It's not usually bedrooms and, you know, and posters on the walls. It was a weird moment.
So, Cece, my daughter has been having virtual play dates, which are a thing now.
Okay.
But she does them on her iPad, and she's been touring people around places in my house that I'm like,
that could go bad a million ways.
Yeah, like I'm like, that's my laundry pile. Like that's my laundry pile in my bedroom. Like, could you keep it in your? I mean, they're kids, so who cares? It's fine. But like, it's an example of it's taking us all out of our comfort zone just a little bit. And I think that people who are dealing better with it have a sense of humor, meaning like
you have to.
We're just doing our best and are a little more relaxed. And actually, in the end, what I've found with clients and everybody I've worked with, if you can be relaxed and just have a real relationship with people, things will be so much better. And we put all of these expectations that we have to be professional and we have to act a certain way. And I think the opportunity here is that this is kind of breaking some of that.
Yeah.
Just it by nature of like the whole chaos, it's breaking that. And I'm hopeful that that will be a really good thing for culture and relationships in general.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what happens, because I firmly believe there is a difference between teaching in a classroom and teaching online. I do think that's a huge discussion, but I do hope that if anything comes in, especially in the educational space, but also the workspace, is that people are more approachable to the concept of, wow, we can work from. I mean, I vividly remember my first gig as a manager. I had a programmer who asked, she said, can I work home one day a week? And she had a life thing, and this was early days. And I said, yeah, go for it. She's slamming code is what she was doing. She was writing code. I could see if she was working. I didn't care. And I got in so much trouble about by my manager, how short-sighted. This is obviously you don't have any experience. You're letting her do that because how do you know she's working? I'm like, I can see if she gets stuff done. But nowadays, and that's still, we know a lot of people are like, you can't work from home. And I hope that this opens up a lot of thinking of, wow, you could work from home and be productive. And maybe you don't need to sit 9 to 5 at your desk when you're working home because you can be more productive. And likewise, I hope more higher education, and schooling across the board thinks about the fact of sometimes you can do stuff online or a hybrid approach. Or I don't think, I had a conversation with someone earlier today who was like, oh, I think this is going to close colleges everywhere because everybody's going to go online. I just laughed. I was like, no, that's not it. Because the classrooms have a purpose and a reason. And but I do think it's going to open up people to the idea that you can do more stuff through technology like this. It's different, but it opens up some doors.
Yeah, I was going to say, one of the comments Jim had, because his wife teaches, was that she's recording stuff. And for some students, the ability to go back and review it is awesome. So why don't we take that back to the classroom when we do it and spend the classroom time really digging in and collaborating and answering questions and working through issues rather than just lecturing all the time. So like there's some great things that I think come out of this. We're almost out of time.
Okay.
So it went by super fast, but I want your one more thing or your one last thing. What's been catching your eye lately?
So it's funny because I knew you were going to ask this question. Thank you for prepping me because I had a million ideas. The one thing that I wanted to share was the stayathomebookclub.com. This guy, Brad Montague, who, it's funny, literally as I just spun around, I thought, did I put pants on today or am I still in PJ pants? He wrote this new book, Becoming Better Grown-Ups. If you've never heard of Brad, he's the writer and co-creator of Kid President.
Okay.
His little brother, Robbie, is Kid President. But this book literally came out Tuesday, and he was supposed to have a big book tour and all this sort of stuff. And he realized, I can't do that anymore. So he started stayathomebookclub.com and did this really cool live stream the other day that's at that URL. Talking about, because it was also, he was supposed to kick off the book tour at the Fred Rogers Institute. And just Brad's one of those guys. He just has such a good vibe. And I just thought that's the thing I want to share because, and he also did a live book launch, unlike anybody I've seen, but I don't want to spoil it, but I know the video's out there. It's like a 15.
We'll add that video when we post the recording.
It's awesome. It'll make you feel good. It'll warm your heart. And let's face it, we all need that right now.
Yeah. The one that has caught my eye and I was thinking of because I was talking to you about higher ed education is Heather Cox Richardson has been doing Thursday night history classes.
Oh, cool.
Live streaming on Facebook. And she's been doing the daily posts about what's going on in the world every day for a while, but these history classes are fascinating.
Oh, neat.
And I'm kind of a dork geek, whatever you want to call that way.
We all have our things that we're dorky and geeky about.
Maybe I should go back to school. I don't know, but I've really been enjoying those, and she's doing it as a kind of a series. So that's what I check out on.
Nice.
But experimentation in media, and God bless her, because she's like, I'm bored at home, and so I'm gonna expose what I know to the rest of you.
That is the best part right now, is everybody just doing stuff.
Yeah.
You know, artists and
There's
cooking
so
classes
much
and
cool stuff.
live concerts. It's the best.
Well, that's a great wrap up. Cece, thank you so much for joining me. It's so much fun to catch up with you, and good luck helping Wheaton
Thank you.
and your peers get over, like, laugh a little bit at themselves and just get on with it.
All right.
So,
Stay safe out there, everybody.
yeah, have a great Friday. Take care. Bye.